I didn't expect the year to end with a stranger pounding on my door in the middle of a snowstorm. Eyes blazing, cheeks flushed red and breath shaking with something between anger and heartbreak. But there she was. "Are you Riley James?" she demanded, snow catching in her dark curls as she stared me down like I'd personally rearranged her entire life. "Yes," I whispered. "Can I help you?" Her jaw tightened. "Your video, the one that blew up overnight, the year-end one." A pause. "You made that about me, didn't you?" And before I could even process the words, she shoved her hands into her pockets and walked past me, uninvited, like she couldn't bear to wait one more second for the truth. That was the first moment I saw her in real life. The woman the entire internet thought I'd crafted, a love confession for the woman I'd never met. 24 hours earlier, my world had been quiet, boring, even. I was the kind of YouTube storyteller who rarely showed my face. I preferred voiceovers, warm color grading, and slow piano tracks that made ordinary memories feel cinematic. I wasn't famous, but my small community was loyal. Every December 31st, I posted a year-in review video, soft aesthetic clips, reflective narration, nothing wild. But this year I'd been honest, too honest. I'd talked about heartbreak without naming names, longing without giving context, and about someone, a silhouette in my life, more dream than person, who had inspired me in ways I never fully understood. I'd ended the video with a confession I assumed was poetic enough not to be misinterpreted. If she ever knew how deeply she changed me, I wonder if she'd stay or run. I uploaded it at 11:58 p.m. By sunrise, it had 4.6 million views. By noon, I had 800 unread messages. And by early evening, she arrived. Her name was Harper Quinn. That I learned only after she stormed into my house, threw her gloves onto my couch, and turned toward me with fire in her eyes. "You don't know me," she said, voice trembling with something raw. "And I don't know you, but thousands of people do know me, and they've been tagging me nonstop. Saying your video is about me, saying I'm the mysterious woman who broke your heart." I blinked. I don't even know who you are. You mentioned the coffee shop by the waterfront. I go there every day." Her eyes didn't soften. "You mentioned the girl with the green notebook. I use one, always have. And that line about humming old songs when she thinks no one's listening? I do that. Everyone knows I do that." My mouth went dry. "I swear I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about no one. Just feelings." Harper let out a humorless laugh. "Do you realize what this has done? People think we had some secret romance. My boss asked if I was having an affair. My ex texted me twice. Someone even made a fan edit of us, and we've never even shared the same oxygen until 5 minutes ago." She looked like she wanted to scream and cry at the same time. Guilt punched me square in the chest. "I didn't know," I whispered. She scoffed. "You didn't know your video might go viral?" "No, everyone else knew, not me." Something in her expression flickered, annoyance dissolving into reluctant empathy. She sank onto my couch with a sigh, rubbing her temples. For the first time, she looked less like a furious storm and more like a woman blindsided by a tidal wave she didn't ask for. "Why did you make it sound so personal?" she murmured. "Because it was," I said softly, her gaze lifted. And something in the air changed, charged, fragile. "Not about you," I clarified, "but about loneliness, about the almosts in my life, the connections I never had the courage to chase, the people I never approached. I wasn't talking about anyone real, not specifically." Harper exhaled slowly, shoulders relaxing as she leaned back. "Then why does it feel like you were describing me?" "I don't know," I admitted, pulling a chair closer. "Maybe you're the type of person people write about without knowing they're writing about you." Her eyes softened for the first time. Silence settled between us, awkward, warm, uncertain. "You could have ignored all of this," I said quietly. "Why come here, in the snow, at night?" She hesitated. "Because I wanted to see you. If someone was going to create a narrative that upended my life, I needed to look her in the eye. And now that you've seen me?" Her gaze traveled over my face, slow, thoughtful. "You're not what I expected." I swallowed. "Good, unexpected, or bad?" Her lips almost curved into a smile. "I'm not sure yet." Somewhere outside, the wind howled. Snow hit the windows in soft bursts. We sat there, two strangers bound temporarily by an algorithm and a misunderstanding. Yet something between us felt strangely gravitational. "What do we do now?" I asked. "You delete the video," she said. That stung more than I expected. "It means a lot to people," I murmured. "It's not just about longing, it's about hope, about reflecting on the year, and about a mysterious woman who changed you." "Yes," I whispered, "a fictional one." Harper studied me with an intensity that made my pulse flutter. She was beautiful in a way that wasn't loud, more like moonlight slipping under a door, subtle but impossible to ignore. High cheekbones dusted with pink from the cold, a small scar along her jaw, eyes a mysterious hazel, shifting like storms layered over sunlight. "Let me watch it," she said suddenly. "What? You owe me that much?" She wasn't wrong. I queued up the video on my TV, the room dim except for the glow of the screen. Harper pulled her knees up on the couch, arms around them, as she watched my voice narrate over scenes of sunlit windows, trembling hands, blurry city streets, and memories I'd never actually lived. Her expression shifted throughout: confusion, curiosity, disbelief, something else I couldn't name. When the final line played, the one the internet wouldn't shut up about. If she ever knew how deeply she changed me, I wonder if she'd stay or run. Harper's eyes lingered on the dark screen long after the video ended. She wasn't breathing normally. Neither was I. Finally she turned to me, voice quiet. "I get why people thought it was me." I nodded, then she added, softer, "But I also get why you made it." We sat there in the stillness, words hovering like fragile lights waiting to touch down. "You're not angry anymore," I observed. "No," she murmured, "just overwhelmed." I let out a shaky breath. "So am I." She looked around my living room, then back at me. "You really live alone?" "Yeah." "No family nearby?" "No." Her lips parted slightly. "You must get lonely." I shrugged, throat tightening. "Sometimes." "Does the video help with that?" I gave a small, sad laugh. "It helps me pretend I understand my feelings." Harper looked at me longer than seemed normal. "You're more vulnerable than your voice sounds. And you're gentler than your entrance suggested." A faint smile appeared. I was a little dramatic. "You were terrifying." She laughed, short, surprised. "And God, it was beautiful." But then her smile faded. "You said the woman in your video wasn't real." "She isn't." Harper leaned forward slightly. "Then what made you describe someone who sounds exactly like me?" I hesitated. "Maybe," I whispered, "I've been imagining the wrong people all year. Maybe I've been looking in the wrong direction." Emotion flared in her eyes, something warm and startled, like she didn't expect the possibility that someone might see her that way. She swallowed. "I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything." But she didn't lean back. She didn't put distance between us. She stayed close. The storm outside deepened, wind rattling the windows like a warning or a dare. Inside, the only sound was our uneven breathing. Harper looked toward the door, then back at me. "I don't think I should drive home in this weather." My pulse jumped. "You can stay, only if you want to." She hesitated, then nodded once. Her gaze lingered on me one last time, soft, searching, no longer angry. "Riley, I don't think your video ruined anything," she whispered. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I think maybe it started something." The air between us warmed, softened, shifted, and that was the moment I realized I wasn't imagining the connection forming between us. It was real, it was quiet, it was happening, and I had no idea where it would lead, but her eyes told me she didn't either. And she wasn't running. The first night she stayed felt like walking through a house that already knew us better than we did. Snow settled like hush on the roof, the radiator clicked and sighed. Harper fell asleep on my couch with her coat curled around her like a sleeping animal, face tilted toward the glow of the television I'd left muted after the video. Moonlight skittered across her eyelashes. I watched the slow rise and fall of her shoulders until my own eyelids grew heavy. I should have been embarrassed that a stranger, someone the internet had imagined into being my lover, was sprawled in my living room. Instead, I felt like a guardian of a small, improbable truth, that she was real, warm, breathing, and not a character I'd invented. In the morning, she woke like anyone who'd been up too late, scrambling for coffee, rubbing at her eyes. She laughed when she realized where she was. "This is not at all what I pictured," she admitted, standing barefoot in my kitchen, toes wriggling on the cold tile. She had a soft way of moving, like she'd grown up around old wooden floors that needed careful steps. "You could have gone home," I said, offering her a mug. She caught the cup with both hands and smiled that small private smile that made my chest feel too tight. "There's no home tonight, my apartment's pipe burst. I figured fate was trying to tell me something." We made a truce with a takeout menu and the reluctant, awkward intimacy of two people who'd met through a series of misfires, one of them a million strangers watching a single, honest confession. I learned that Harper worked at a nonprofit that coordinated community gardens on reclaimed waterfront lots. Her days were a far cry from the polished, quiet footage of my videos. Her hands were calloused from trowels and paintbrushes. She had a laugh that came from the belly and a vocabulary that slipped easily into metaphors about soil and roots. "You work with plants," I said, watching her stir her coffee. "And people?" "And people," she agreed. "We build places where people can meet each other that aren't in front of a screen." I had to swallow that one. "You're romanticizing my profession." She looked at me with an eyebrow raised. "You romanticize loneliness." Then she shrugged. "Maybe we both romanticize what we don't have." "You make it sound noble," I said. "Mine's just talking into a mic." "Your voice reaches people," she countered. "That's not nothing." It was the first time anyone had framed my small channel as something more than a hobby. There was compassion in the way she said it, clear and unassuming, like sun through leaves. I wanted to tell her how much it meant. Instead, I told her about my routine, waking early to edit in the dim, answering messages, keeping my life curated into bite-sized notes I could narrate later. I told her about the quietness that had slowly filled my life since my last serious relationship dissolved into polite agreement rather than anger. "Your last relationship?" she asked gently. I hesitated, not out of a desire to hide but because the last one still felt like a map with a burned center. "She was named June," I said finally. "We met at an open mic where I was reading a piece that was more confession than performance. She loved books. She left the night we stopped, laughing at the same jokes." "That hurts," Harper said. Her eyes softened. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm learning to be." She reached out and brushed my hand, just a fingertip across my knuckles, and the contact felt electric and ordinary at once. I chased the sensation like a moth to a street lamp, bright, a little dangerous, but impossible to ignore. We spent the day like anyone who had been thrust together by circumstance. We walked to the waterfront, where she worked, an expanse of reclaimed lots where community plots looped with neat paths and reclaimed wooden benches. Early spring air bit at our cheeks even though the calendar stubbornly insisted it was still winter. People moved in slow halos around us. Dogs bright and eager, toddlers in layers like stuffed dolls. Harper moved like she belonged there, greeted people, checked on plants, straightened signs with a touch that suggested she'd been doing this work for a long time. "You build things," I said. "You fix things." "We make things possible," she corrected. "There's a difference." We settled on a bench by an old tree and the city hummed like a faint accompaniment. People pointed at us once, then again, and I felt that familiar nauseous twinge from the attention the video had drawn. Someone had recognized Harper already, someone else pointed, whispering into their phone. The world was smaller now because the internet had a way of shrinking the distance between strangers. "People asked if I knew you," Harper said quietly. "They called you the narrator and the poet of small things. They wanted me to pose for pictures." She set her bag down next to her, fingers whirring at the leather strap. "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm not that strategic." "You weren't strategic about this confession?" she parroted, amusement in her tone. "Do you ever plan anything at all?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Mostly I try to be honest." "You're very good at being honest," she said. "It's dangerous, but honest things have weight." We talked about small things, the way she'd once rescued a wilting fern in an alleyway, the fact that I had an irrational fear of public pools, that she collected mismatched mugs, that I'd once spent an entire summer learning to make the same loaf of bread until it tasted like my childhood. We traded stories like paper boats, watching them sail and sink and sometimes bob back up again. When she laughed, a bright, abrupt sound that surprised a flock of pigeons into the air, I felt something inside me soften. It wasn't a dizzy, romantic swoon, it was recognition. We fit into each other's sentences in a way that felt like coming home to a room you didn't know you'd been missing, and yet the undercurrent of the video tugged at both of us, an invisible thread pulling at the hems of conversation. People still recognized us. Comments still came in. Fans sent messages, some adoring, some accusatory, some conspiratorial. They wrote as though they had a stake in our lives, as though our first meeting was a chapter in a book they'd been reading for years. "Do you ever worry it's too much?" Harper asked later, when we were alone beneath a makeshift greenhouse, the smell of damp soil dense in the air. "Every day," I said, but then someone leaves a message saying my words help them through a night and the worry becomes worth it. "What about the people you leave in your videos?" she pressed. "The ones who might be hurt by the way you imagine them?" I wanted to say that I was careful, that I blurred faces and changed details and tried not to weaponize anyone's life for views. But the truth was less tidy. My video had been honest to the point of resembling real life. People had threaded themselves into it. The internet had a way of sewing fiction and fact together until neither could be unraveled. "And what about the person who claims it's about her?" I asked. She studied the seedlings in the greenhouse, fingertips hovering above fragile leaves. "I don't know," she said softly. "Maybe she's right, maybe she hears echoes. Maybe she's seen herself in your lines because she wants to be seen. Or maybe it's coincidence. Or maybe she's the kind of person who hums old songs when she thinks no one is listening," I offered. Harper looked at me over her shoulder, amused. "Maybe." Time smoothed over us like warm clay. We found ease in the ordinary, tending seedlings, sweeping soil from shoes, sharing a sandwich under the plastic glare of the greenhouse. At some point our hands brushed, and neither of us pulled away. The contact was small, but it felt like a promise we hadn't yet learned to name. We were careful about labels. She talked about the nonprofit's plan to host a winter seed swap, a way to keep the community's momentum alive through cold months. She suggested I speak. "Your voice would be perfect," she said, and I felt my face heat at the idea. Public speaking beyond my videos felt too much like exposure. But there was a pulse of excitement under the fear. "Would you actually come?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "I'm not sure I can handle being the thing people come to see." "You don't have to be the spectacle," she said. You can just be you. People come for your honesty, not for gossip. Her confidence in my words unsettled me in the best way. It felt like someone giving you permission to be yourself and then handing you an extra lantern. I wanted to accept the light, but I also feared what the brightness might expose. "Can I ask you something?" I said after a silence thick with the city's evening breath. "Ask," she said. Why the fury the first night you came?" I asked. "Why the knock and the accusation?" Her jaw tightened for a moment. "Because I felt exposed," she said finally. "Because the internet's made me small in front of people I didn't invite into my life. I was angry that someone else could shape my narrative without asking." "I get that," I said. "I'm sorry." She shrugged, but her expression softened. "I'm also curious," she admitted. "I wanted to know why someone would make me into a story I didn't write." "You wanted to meet the person who styled your silhouette," I said. She grinned. That sounded more poetic in my head. Silence folded over us again, comfortable like pages closing over each other. Later, when the sky was nearly black and the city hummed like a settled animal, Harper and I found ourselves back in my living room. The TV showed some advert for winter boots we weren't paying attention to. Outside, the storm had become a threatening rumor. She curled up beside me under a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender. Our shoulders touched, then shifted, then touched again. We spoke in low tones about nothing and everything. She told me about a childhood spent in a house with a backyard that collapsed into a small forest where she learned to name weeds like friends. I told her about a lonely year when I'd nearly given up making things that mattered to the public but kept making them because the act of making steadied me. "It's easier to be brave over a screen," she said. "You can edit yourself into bravery." "And you're brave in person," I countered. "You make things happen." She looked at me like she was memorizing a map. "Are you lonely right now?" she asked. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say that my solitude was an armor, that I'd chosen it deliberately. Instead, I said the truth. "Yes." Her hand found mine with a deliberate, gentle pressure. She laced her fingers through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. It felt like a vow we hadn't spoken. "I will not run." We sat like that, a small island of warmth, while the world beyond the windows raged and gossiped. Then, with the casual gravity of people who lived lives too public for comfort, she took out her phone. "Someone just texted me," she said, voice even. "It's Claire." My heart thudded against my ribs. The name was a cold, bright pebble dropped in a quiet pond. "Claire?" I echoed stupidly. "Yeah," Harper said. "My ex, she's been quiet, but she saw the video and she thinks the woman in the video is her." A splintered silence. My brain tried to assemble the pieces. Claire as a person in Harper's past, the video referencing an unnamed lover, the internet spiraling once more into projection. The day had been small and warm, and then suddenly all its edges felt jagged. "What did she say?" I asked. Harper scrolled and read, aloud, voice thin with a history I could feel like a draft under a door. She said, "Are you the girl in that video? People keep asking. If it's you, say so." Harper's thumb hovered over the reply button. She didn't look at me. "I haven't replied," she said. I felt a prick of jealousy, sharp and unfamiliar, and then guilt for feeling it at all. This wasn't about me. It was about her past. But the thought of another woman from Harper's life stepping into our fragile, newly forming orbit made my throat close. "Do you want me to meet her?" I blurted. Harper laughed, a small, incredulous sound. "No, that would be complicated." "Why would it be complicated?" I asked. "Because some things are better spoken about without an audience," she replied tightly. "Because Claire and I have a history that isn't yours to disrupt." I nodded even though she wasn't asking for permission. "I understand." She slid closer, pressing her forehead briefly to mine. "I don't want to rush into anything," she whispered. "But I also don't want to ignore what we have." "Then let's not rush," I said. "Let's not ignore either." We held each other in silence, a pact stitched in small gestures in the language of two people weighing risk against possibility. Outside, snow fell in a kind of gentle fury, and inside, the radiator kept its steady, unromantic hum. When she finally replied to Claire, it was a thing of measured care. No performance, no spectacle. "I'm not the person she wrote about," she typed. "But thanks for checking." She hit send, looked at me and shrugged. "Ambiguity is annoying in real life. You can tell her the truth eventually," I said, "when you're ready." "Maybe," she said. "Maybe I'll tell her everything. Or maybe I'll tell her nothing. Some stories should be for the people living them." Her phone buzzed again, another message, another world nudging in. She silenced it and tucked it away like a fragile object she wasn't ready to open. We talked until the night thinned into something like morning, about fears, about projects, about the ridiculous intimacy of being known to strangers. We tried to keep the outside world at bay but failed occasionally, reading messages aloud with bemused horror at the creativity of fan theories. At some point in the small hours, she said very softly, "Don't ever make a video that becomes a person's version of me without asking." I felt every word like an oath. "I won't," I promised. She let the promise hang between us like a protective blanket, and I felt unbelievably lucky and terrified, because promises were easy. Living up to them was where the real work lived. When she finally left my apartment that morning, the snow had softened its edge to a forgiving powder. She hugged me in the doorway, a tentative, searching embrace that was neither test nor pronouncement but something in between. "See you?" she asked, breath steaming. "Yes," I said, and meant it. She walked away with her bag over her shoulder, a figure slipping into a world that now seemed slightly more possible than it had before. My door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded almost like an exhale. I stood there for a long time, palms flat against the wood, feeling the echo of her presence like the ghost of a song. The phone on my kitchen counter blinked with new notifications, messages, tags, clips, but I ignored it for a while. I walked to the window and watched the arc of her retreating silhouette dissolve into the city's gray. She'd come into my life like an uninvited line in a poem and then stayed, like a refrain you didn't know you needed. And in that quiet, with the city waking and the world conspiring to turn our private mourning into public fodder, I realized something dangerous and beautiful. I wanted her in my life beyond the video, beyond the internet's appetite for stories. But the internet was hungry, and there were things I hadn't told her yet. Truths about June, about how I'd let fear keep me small, about the ways the camera had been both my shield and my bridge. As I reached for my phone, a new notification glowed at the top of the screen, a mention from an account I didn't recognize, a simple line that made my stomach drop and my fingers go cold. "You should watch what you make public, Riley. Some stories come with claims." It was unsigned, it was a warning, it was the kind of message that made a small life suddenly very loud. I stared at it, the weight of possibility and consequence pressing against my ribs. Outside, the city breathed. Inside, my living room was suddenly too small for both of us, and whatever the next move would be. I put the phone face down and for a moment let myself imagine a summer with Harper. Slow mornings, community gardens, author readings at dusk. Then I looked at the blinking cursor of a video title on my laptop and felt the pull of all the eyes waiting for me to choose. I had no idea how to reconcile public confession with private care, but I did know one thing as blood-warm and startling as a first kiss. I didn't want to lose what was unfolding between us because strangers decided to make a story of it. And so I made a promise in the quiet. I would learn how to hold both worlds without breaking either. I didn't open the message again, but it opened something in me, a sharp awareness that the world watching us wasn't just curious, it was intrusive, possessive, hungry. And hunger had a way of twisting things until even truth looked suspicious. I spent the next hour pacing my apartment, touching objects as if they could steady me, the edge of the kitchen counter, the spine of a book, the warm ceramic of the mug Harper had used. Her presence echoed still, soft and lingering like the ghost of perfume on fabric. A part of me wanted to text her immediately, to warn her about the message, to pull her close into the safety of shared worry. Another part held back. She had just reclaimed a small slice of quiet after days of unexpected chaos. I didn't want to drag another shadow into her morning before she'd even had a chance to breathe. Instead, I went for a walk along the waterfront, pulling my coat tight against the wind. The community gardens stretched out in neat, barren rows beneath the winter sky, resting quietly until spring returned. I imagined Harper here hours earlier, hands in pockets, humming some old Motown song she grew up hearing on her father's vinyl player. She'd said humming made her feel grounded. I stopped near the bench we'd shared and sat. The cold seeped through my jeans, anchoring me. The message replayed in my head like an unwelcome narrator. "You should watch what you make public. Some stories come with claims." Claims? Threat? Warning? Possessive familiarity? I replayed every detail from the day before, wondering who among the crowd might have taken a picture or overheard or felt entitled to us. A gust of wind slapped the thought from my head. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. That's when a voice pulled me from the spiral. "You're here early." I turned. Harper stood a few feet away, bundled in a forest green jacket, cheeks flushed from cold, hair tucked messily behind her ears. A paper cup steamed in her hand. "I brought you coffee," she said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. My chest warmed. "How'd you know I'd be here?" She shrugged. "Because if I were you after the last couple of days, I'd run toward the one quiet place I know." I smiled, but it faltered when her expression changed, soft curiosity shifting into concern. "You look unsettled," she said gently, sitting beside me. "Did something happen?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I cared too much about not hurting her. "There was a message," I finally admitted. "This morning, someone said I should be careful about what I make public, that some stories come with claims." Harper stiffened. "What does that even mean?" "I don't know," I whispered, but it didn't feel like a random troll. She processed that quietly, face shadowed with thought. "Could be someone overinvested in the video, could be someone who thinks they know you, or someone who thinks they know you," I said softly, her jaw tensed. If it's about Claire. I'm not saying it is, I interrupted, but the timing. She shook her head. Claire wouldn't do that, she barely texts back on time, let alone sends cryptic messages. We both let out shaky laughs. It helped. Whoever sent it, I don't want it to scare you, she said. I don't want anything to ruin this before we even know what this is. My heart loosened at her honesty. What do you think it is? I asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Snow clung to the sharp line of her jaw, melting slowly. Then she turned to me, eyes earnest and unguarded. I think it's something that could matter, she said. And you don't ruin things that could matter. Her voice trembled just slightly. Do you want to walk? She asked, as if sensing I needed motion more than stillness. We walked along the path that wound through the dormant plots, shoulders brushing. Kids played nearby, throwing snowballs with loud, joyful screams, untouched by the complexities of adult entanglements. I envied them for a moment. I've been thinking, Harper said after we'd found a quieter stretch, about how the video feels like a third person in the room with us. I winced. I didn't mean for it to be. I know, but we still have to deal with the reality of its existence. It's shaped how we met, how we talk, how people see us. I don't want that to be the blueprint for whatever we're becoming. A lump grew in my throat. You want something real? She nodded, breath curling in the cold air. Yes, not a fictional version of me, not a romanticized silhouette, me. I want that too, I whispered. We walked until we reached a spot overlooking the river, frozen, in jagged sheets of reflective ice. The city's skyline stretched across the distance, a collage of straight lines and glowing windows. Harper leaned against the railing, her gloved hands resting on the cold metal. Riley, she said quietly, her voice softer than the wind. Can I ask you something personal? Always. Why did you create a woman who hums old songs when she thinks no one's listening? Why that detail? Why something so specific? I swallowed, because it was something I saw once. In a person you knew? In a stranger, I said, eyes drifting upward. She was on the subway. She had headphones on, but her lips were moving. You could tell she wasn't aware of anyone else. And I thought, people like that feel so alive, so unself-conscious. I wondered what her story was, what her voice sounded like, who she sang for when she was alone. Harper blinked. And you remembered? I remember people who make me feel something, I said, even if I don't know why. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with a depth I hadn't seen before. So you wrote about people who made you feel, she murmured. Maybe, I admitted, or maybe I wrote the person I wished I had the courage to love. The wind paused as if the world leaned in. Harper's breath hitched. Riley, I continued before doubt could swallow me. I didn't expect her to walk into my apartment during a snowstorm, but she did, and suddenly the universe felt strangely literal. A faint laugh escaped her, breathy and disbelieving. Are you saying you wrote me into existence? No, I whispered. I'm saying I wrote the possibility of you into existence. She stepped closer, not touching, but enough that her presence tugged at something deep inside me. That's dangerous, she said softly, and flattering. And terrifying, I added, her lips curved. That too. We fell into silence that wasn't empty. It was ripened by all the unspoken things blooming between us. After a long moment, Harper exhaled. Riley, I want to keep seeing you, she said. I want to know what you look like when you're tired, or happy, or annoyed. I want to hear your real voice before you edit it. I want to know if you drink tea when you're anxious, or if you pace, or whatever you do. I want something real. I felt my chest swell painfully, like ribs making room for a second heartbeat. I want all of that too, I said. But, she added, and my stomach dropped, I need you to understand something. She turned fully to me, the bleak winter light tracing her features. When things between me and Claire ended, it wasn't clean, it wasn't cruel, but it wasn't tidy. There's still history, dust, unfinished corners. I don't want you stepping into something that might hurt you. I'm not afraid of unfinished corners, I said. You should be, she murmured. She sounded like someone who'd been hurt enough to believe warning someone else was a kindness. I reached for her gloved hand. She let me take it. I don't need perfect, I whispered. I just need honest. She looked at our hands, hers soft and warm in mine, and her expression shifted from guarded to something, like surrender. I can do honest, she said. A flutter of relief shivered through me. We walked back, slower this time, as if both of us were learning the pacing of something new. Harper held my hand until we reached the street corner where our paths split. Come to the seed swap, she said. Next Saturday, I'll save you a spot. Front row? I teased. Wherever you want, she murmured, brushing her thumb lightly over the back of my hand, a small, tender gesture that made warmth bloom behind my ribs. I'll be there, I said. She started to walk away, then paused, turning back with a sudden thought. Riley, yes? Her eyes softened. Thank you for writing something honest, even if you didn't mean to write me. I smiled. Maybe I did, I just didn't know it yet. She laughed lightly. shook her head and walked off, disappearing into the late morning bustle of the city. The rest of the day passed in a buoyant haze until late afternoon, when I checked my phone again. Dozens of notifications, tags, messages. One unmistakable headline. Claire reacts to viral love video, insists the woman is me. A punch to the gut, I clicked the link. Claire filmed outside her apartment telling reporters, "It's pretty obvious who she's talking about. Harper and I had a complicated relationship. I'm not surprised she'd express it creatively." My blood iced. The media had taken the bait. They were building a news story brick by brick, one that put Harper in the center of a narrative she hadn't consented to. My heart pounded. What if Harper saw this before I could warn her? What if it dragged her back into old wounds? What if... My phone buzzed. It was Harper, a single message. "Can you come over? Now." My pulse skipped. Another message followed, shakier this time. "Please." The urgency in that word cut through every hesitation I had. I grabbed my coat and keys, heart thundering, and rushed toward whatever waited for me. Fear and hope tangled in equal measure. Something told me everything was about to change, and whatever came next, it would test the fragile, beautiful thing growing between us in ways neither of us could have predicted. The trains were running slow because of the lingering snow, so I jogged the last 3 blocks to Harper's apartment, breath fogging in sharp bursts. My heart hammered for a dozen reasons. Fear of what I'd find, fear of what she'd say, fear that Claire's public claim was already unraveling everything we'd begun to weave between us. When I reached her building, the front door buzzed open before I even knocked. Harper must have been standing by the intercom. I climbed the narrow staircase 2 steps at a time, my pulse roaring like something trying to escape. She opened her apartment door as soon as I reached it. Her eyes, those warm storm-touched hazel eyes, were red around the edges. She stepped aside wordlessly, letting me in. I crossed the threshold and immediately felt the tension buzzing through the space, as if every wall had been holding its breath. Her apartment was cozy, lived in, faintly smelling of eucalyptus and soil. Plants hung from macrame ropes near the windows. A soft blanket was tossed over the arm of her couch, but today the warmth of the room was overshadowed by the sharp, unsettled energy radiating from her. "Harper," I whispered. I sat beside her, close but not touching until she decided what she needed. "Claire," she swallowed hard. "She talked to reporters." I nodded again, slower this time. "I saw. She's saying the video is about her." Her jaw tightened. "She said she's not surprised I'd express things creatively." Her voice cracked. "I don't know whether to be embarrassed or angry or just exhausted." I inched closer. "You don't have to feel any one thing." She lifted her head. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be the center of a narrative I didn't write. But now she's pulled herself into it, dragged me back into something that should have stayed in the past." Silence thickened the air. I gently touched her knee. She didn't pull away. "Tell me what you need," I murmured. Harper looked at me with a rawness that made my chest ache. "I don't know what I need, I just know you were the only person I wanted to call." Something in me broke open and flooded with warmth, she continued. "Claire and I ended because we couldn't be vulnerable with each other. We held everything in, and now she's doing this, claiming something that isn't hers, turning a moment, your moment, into her spotlight." "It wasn't her moment," I whispered. Her eyes flicked to mine. "Whose was it?" I felt my breath stutter. I'd spent weeks, months even, imagining a fictional person who embodied everything I longed for. Gentleness, courage, self-awareness, warmth. Without meaning to, I had written the outline of someone like Harper before ever knowing her name. "It was mine," I said. "And maybe it was a doorway you walked through." Her eyes softened. She leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. For a long while we stayed like that. Silent, breathing, letting the gravity between us settle into something undeniable. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steadier. "I don't want Claire's claim to become the truth just because she said it," she murmured. "I don't want people deciding we're characters in some love triangle." "We're not," I said. She lifted her head and looked at me with a new intensity. "Then what are we?" It was a question without armor, a question that asked for courage, a question that could shape tomorrow. I reached for her hand, slowly giving her space to move away if she wanted. She didn't. "We're something new," I whispered, "something honest, something we get to define, not the internet." Her fingers tightened around mine. "But to do that," I continued, "we have to talk about what this really is, not the video, not the attention, just us." She nodded slowly. "Okay," my throat tightened. I took a breath. "Harper," I said gently. "I'm falling for you." She inhaled sharply, as if the words tugged something loose inside her. "I know we haven't known each other long, and I know the timing is messy, but every moment with you, every conversation, every silence, feels right, like something I didn't realize I'd been looking for." She closed her eyes briefly, letting the words settle. "When I wrote the video I didn't know who I was talking about," I admitted. But now I think the woman I described was a constellation of traits I hoped existed in someone real. And then you walked in, furious, beautiful, honest, and you were real, so real it terrified me. She opened her eyes again. They shimmered not with tears but with clarity. I'm falling for you too, she whispered, slowly, carefully, but deeply. A beat, and it scares me. I'm scared too, I admitted. She let out a breathy laugh. Good, we can be terrified together. I smiled. Deal, but before the warmth could fully settle, her phone buzzed violently on the coffee table. The sound sliced through the moment. Harper flinched. Claire. Her name flashed bright on the screen. Harper stared at it like it was a shard of glass she was tired of holding. I don't want to talk to her, she murmured. You don't have to, I said. She exhaled shakily. I think I need to. I swallowed. Do you want me to stay? Her eyes softened. Yes, please. She answered the call on speaker. Hello? Claire's voice came through sharp, polished, and practiced. Harper, we need to talk. Harper stiffened. About what? About the video. Reporters keep contacting me. Your friends are messaging me non-stop. This is spiraling. Then stop fueling it, Harper snapped. I'm not fueling anything, Claire said defensively. I just told the truth. No, Harper said firmly. You told a story that worked for you. And you left out the part where we broke up because you didn't know how to let anyone in. Silence crackled through the line. Harper, Claire said, voice lower. Are you seeing someone? Harper's eyes flicked toward me. She took a slow breath, a brave breath. Yes, she said. My heart seized. Claire scoffed. Is it her, the narrator girl? A hot flush climbed up my neck. The narrator girl. That was all I was to the world, until Harper chose otherwise. Harper squeezed my hand. Her name is Riley, she said, and what we have is real, not something the internet made up, not something you get to claim. The silence that followed was ice cold. Then Claire spoke, brittle and wounded. So that's it, you've moved on. Yes, Harper said softly. And I need you to let me. A long exhale from Claire, then click. She hung up. Harper set her phone down gently as though she were laying a fragile artifact, to rest. With the last thread severed, something in her posture loosened. She leaned into me again, this time with relief instead of tension. Thank you for being here, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere, I said. She rested her forehead against mine. The world outside dimmed to a soft blur, leaving only the warmth of her breath and the slow, steady cadence of a feeling becoming real. After a long moment, she pulled back slightly, studying my face as if memorizing it. Riley, she said, will you stay for a while? Always. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not yet, but something more intimate. A promise blooming, she guided me to the couch, pulling a blanket over us. We talked in low voices about everything and nothing. Her favorite childhood book, my fear of thunderstorms, her hope of starting a rooftop garden someday. The sun dipped lower, painting her apartment in amber. At one point she reached out and gently touched my cheek, an honest, reverent touch. I leaned into her palm. I like you, she whispered. I like you more, I whispered back. She laughed, a musical soft sound. Impossible, she said. Watch me. She blushed, actually blushed, and then, moving so slowly it felt like time opened its hands, she rested her head on my shoulder. We stayed like that until dusk blurred into night and the streetlights flickered on. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. The moment held us like a held breath. She took my hand again, thumb brushing my knuckles. Riley, she said quietly. Yes? Don't stop making videos, she murmured. Just maybe write the next one knowing I'm real. I felt my heart flutter at the edges. I will, I promised. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to mine once more. A tender, wordless confession that didn't need the internet's approval. It belonged to us alone. Good night, she whispered. Good night, I breathed. When I stepped into the cold hallway, I felt changed. Filled. Brimming with something that wasn't just hope, but courage. As I walked home through the snow, ideas for my next video already began to shape themselves. Not about longing for someone imaginary, not about heartbreak, not about an unnamed silhouette, but about the moment I realized that sometimes what goes viral isn't the story, but the doorway it opens. And I knew exactly whose face would be softly illuminated in that video, not as a character, not as a metaphor, but as the woman who walked into my life like a storm and stayed like sunrise. Harper, real, warm, fearless in her own quiet way. My story was no longer about the woman I imagined. It was about the woman I chose, and who chose me back. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, stay close for more like it.